This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
And knights were brave and bold. The good king had died, and no one could decide who was right.
Place to Be Nation, hello and welcome back to another wonderful episode, I say they're wonderful, of Pop Goes Classics Disney Edition. Of course, it wouldn't be wonderful without my two other co-hosts, both from different time zones. So first up, the furthest away from me, I'm pretty sure, we have our good friend and Disney connoisseur, Steve. How you doing over there today, Steve?
I'm doing good. How are you, Miranda?
I am making it.
That's all you can do, right?
Right? That's what we have to do. And of course, the other half of our trio, the other third of our trio, our king and leader of Place to Be Nation over there, Mr. Double A himself. How you doing, Andy?
I'm great, Miranda. It was my understanding that there would be no math during today's podcast recording. So in terms of fractions and percentages, you got me lost here. But I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to this discussion because as much as I love Disney, I was not high on this movie, when now that we're up to in our chronological watch. So I'm very interested to hear all of our thoughts combined because, not saying I hate it and it's a bad movie. It's just, if I'm ranking, it's like really near the bottom of my personal ranking. So I'm looking forward to this discussion.
And before I tell the good people what movie this is, if I remember correctly, Steve, it also was not high on your ranking system either. Is this correct?
Yeah, it definitely, it wasn't like at the bottom. There are other films I think that are much worse than this. This just feels very average. Okay.
And then I will be part of the trio here that loved it. So I guess we'll get varying opinions on tonight's episode. And of course, in case you're wondering and scratching your head and you're like, what the heck are they talking about? We are talking about Disney's 1963 animated musical fantasy comedy, originally released to theaters on December 12th, called The Sword and the Stone. I absolutely love this movie. It is not my favorite movie, and it is obviously, to me, not the worst movie, but I highly rank it above average. So it's not just average. So this, of course, is based on a novel from the same name, which was published in 1938 as a single novel, and then again in 58 as what they called a tetralogy, which book person in me didn't even know what that meant, but okay. It has music, but not as much as the other films that we've discussed, because that seems to be a central point of most of the Disney films that we discuss is the music. So before I kind of get into the plot and everything, usually we ask, like, what do you remember about the movie? Where do you remember seeing it? Like, does it hold? Because you guys don't really, either one of them, have like a high opinion of it. Does it hold anything? Do you remember when you saw it, or is it kind of you don't?
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, well, for me, the first time I watched it was actually last year when I was watching all the Disney films for my wonderful reviews of Disney. I had heard of it prior to it, and I might have seen like references to it every now and then, but I had never seen it like in its entirety. I always had known that this film kind of had a, I don't want to say bad reputation, but just it was one of those films that, like I said, it just felt very, many just kind of felt it was average, not, not great, but not terrible. Just one not to kind of, unless you're like one of those, like unless you're a completionist, maybe not go out your way to see, unless you're like, you are, because it does, deal with a very, unique topic, basically the rise of King Arthur. Right. And, obviously if you're a historian, it's, kind of interesting to see. But when I did go finally watch it, I always had the mindset of, watching all the films, like, okay, I'm going to go in with an open mind. I'm going to go in with I'm going in with fresh eyes, and maybe the film will surprise me, And at the end, while it definitely was not as bad as I think many consider it, it kind of felt like a little bit of a step backwards, especially from some of the films we had previously watched. At least in my opinion.
I could see that. Okay. Andy, what do you think?
I mean, I had to have seen this as a kid, and I am a completionist. I had, my OCD, so I was actually collecting all the movies on VHS, which I really wish I still had, because some of them are worth a lot of money. And my mother, was was cleaning out my parents' house and found the box. She's like, "We're gonna get rid of these. Like, donate them." Well, great. I think it was donated to a hospital, like a children's, like a floor. So it went to a good place. It wasn't just like it was a tag sale thing. So I'm happy about that. But also, a little extra cashish in my pocket. So I did watch it, as a grown up, and probably in my 20s, something like that. And I just remember just being bored with it. I really do like the Arthurian legend tale and all that, Knights of the Round Table, that kind of stuff. I do like that source material. It's just the movie just did not hold my attention. And I did, during this rewatch for this pod, I did go in with an open mind. And I'm like, okay, it's been a long time. I barely remember exactly all the plot points. So it's almost fresh eyes a little bit. And I enjoyed parts of it. I didn't hate it. I don't hate any Disney film, really. There are films like I'm not the biggest fan.
You don't like them as much.
Yeah, like if we talk about Good Dinosaur, like Pixar, Good Dinosaur, I really despise that movie. I think they should never have done it.
I didn't know that. Okay, we'll get into that one later.
If we do cover Pixar, but but here, it's nice. I mean, it was a little different. Like Steve said, it's not, because most of the Disney animated films are musicals at their hearts. They have songs and this does have songs, but there's nothing that gets stuck in your head, kind of. There's no a little sneak peek, no bare necessities, no Hakuna Matata. Under the Sea. There's no real grabber from this movie. There is a fun villain, but doesn't show up for an hour in the movie. So it kind of, that bums me out a little bit, because I did enjoy her when she was on screen for her limited time. But it's kind of, and also it's a little different too. The look, like one of my notes is like, it looks more like a Chuck Jones movie. Like something you would see, like, released by Warner Bros. Even though I know it has the Disney feel to it, it's just that the way the lines are and stuff, it did feel a little Chuck Jones-esque. But no, I mean, it did. I do have a higher opinion than they did going in, though. I will say that. Okay,
so it's funny. So both the boys don't really care for it, and it's funny. A lot of people don't, in general, from the consensus that I drew. I asked a couple of different groups. I forgot to post it in our Place to Be group, but I asked in a couple of my book groups and just in various people, like, where does this movie rank for you? Is it middle, top, end? And a lot of people were like, oh, I forgot about that movie. And the reason I find this fascinating from the two of you guys and the majority of people that I ask is because the film actually had some pretty moderate success. I won't say like amazing success, but it was moderate. Financially, it did really well. It was the sixth highest grossing film of 1963 in North America. And it earned a huge rental rate, although British critics perceived it and loved it a lot more than American critics did. And American critics said that it had too much humor and that the narrative was too thin. So I think it's funny that the general consensus amongst most Disney fans is it's not my favorite. It even received an Academy Award nomination for Best Score, which is funny to me because, again, it's like you said, there are no songs in this that really stick out. Like, even though it's a movie I really, really love, I had to rewatch it to remember some of the songs, which most are sung by Merlin in this movie. Versus any other character. As the boys did mention, this is a Arthur tale, and it does take place in England, which is maybe why it was perceived better among the British than the Americans. I'm not sure. Don't want to say that that's why, but it does begin in England with the death of King Uther Pendragon, with no heir to his name, and so England is threatened to be torn apart, basically, by war. We all know that story. And then years later, we come to young Wart, who is a 12-year-old orphan, and he's training to be a squire, and he's accompanied by his foster brother, and they're on a hunting trip, and he accidentally prevents Kay from shooting a deer and goes to retrieve the arrow to make up for his mistake. When he's in the woods, though, he ends up falling in the cottage of Merlin, and everyone knows Merlin is a very powerful wizard, and he announces that he's going to be Arthur's tutor. So I want to know, because Merlin to me is the most interesting character in this movie. So how do we feel about Wart and Merlin? Like, are you even remotely interested in Wart and who he is, or are you more interested in Merlin at this point? Andy, what do you say?
Well, I mean, Merlin is a presence. He's the one that, he's basically our narrator too, for the most part.
He is.
We kind of he represents us, and he's the one responsible for playing the story. I got, it's funny is that, and the movie came out, 22 years later, but I got a very Doc Brown Marty vibe during my rewatch from these two. It's kind of like, weird how, like, this young boy and this old guy, and this guy's kind of like, a goofy, scientist, so to speak, or magician. But I like the dynamic between the two of them. I mean, I think, I really couldn't stand some of the other characters, the minor characters, but I mean, I enjoyed this part of the movie, at least.
Okay. Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's almost like they made Merlin out to be like the main character of the film, and Arthur is more like I don't want to say sidekick, but it definitely seems like, kind of more, he becomes eventually important, as we'll see, as when he becomes Merlin's pupil. And of all the such a terrible nickname to be given, Wart. That's just so so mean.
I do agree.
That's just so mean. But yeah, Merlin's definitely the big star of the film. I think he's the one that when you ask people about this film, he's the one that remember. One of my favorite characters in the film is Archimedes, the owl.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of like the antithesis of almost what Merlin is. Like Merlin's, is so confident with everything he knows because he, says he can see into the, he's been to the future and he knows everything. Right. And, Archimedes is very, pessimistic about some of the things he says, but he's still, and, he's very, I don't want to say resentful to Arthur at first, but he's not trusting, don't want to say not trusting. He's, kind of cold to him at first, but eventually comes to kind of, like him and eventually helps teach him as well. But I think some of the best moments of this film are when, or some of Archimedes sniping at Merlin.
His facial expression.
He was snooty. I wrote in my notes, he's a doubting Thomas. Basically, he's kind of like, he tries to keep Merlin grounded, I guess, because Merlin is kind of flighty.
Oh, he is. But I mean, I feel like based on all the other versions of Merlin that I've come across, like having the power that he does and the knowledge he does, like you kind of would be off in another world, wouldn't you? I mean, you kind of would be very kind of somewhere else. Like you said, you actually used the analogy of you saw that the Marty Doc, and think of how kind of Doc is, like off in another world. He's too smart for his own good, and he's kind of always somewhere else, So that makes sense to me. Archimedes is really funny, and actually he comes with Arthur and Wart and Merlin back to Arthur's home. And he introduced one of my favorite parts is when Merlin is introducing Archimedes to Wart's, foster father. And he's like, this is Archimedes, and he's a highly educated owl. And there's this face that Archimedes makes at this point where you're like, oh, he's sassy. Like, like, oh, okay, that's sweet. Okay. But when, of course, they get back Sir Ector, it doesn't really want Merlin to stay because he doesn't believe in magic. So I guess he finally agrees and puts him like in this decrepit old tower. And Merlin begins tutoring Arthur and transforming him. And this is where Archimedes actually ends up saving Arthur. And of course, Arthur's sent to the kitchen as punishment after he tries to tell his lesson to a disbelieving Ector. Because again, he doesn't believe in magic. So there's a lot of transforming that's happening here, and he's trying to teach him about different things. What did you think about the relationship between Arthur and Merlin here when they're going through like the transformations and the things that he's putting him through?
Well, I think that the whole point that Merlin's trying to get across to him is that it takes more than just brawn and muscle to kind of be what's the word I'm thinking of? Like it takes more than brawn and muscle. It takes knowledge to get where you want to be in life. And and I think by transforming him first like into a fish and then eventually we'll see like into a squirrel and to a bird, that he has to Arthur has to overcome these different, like kind of adapt to his new situation and kind of use knowledge to overcome the odds. And that's I think that's the whole, like I said, that's the point that Merlin's trying to get across to him. And that kind of conflicts with Ector and Kay, who think it's all about being all being strong, and Ector wants Arthur to just stick to his duties and eventually kind of become Kay's squire and all that. So it's kind of a tug of war almost with Arthur, that he's trying, he wants to trust what Merlin's saying while at the same time not kind of toe the line with his adoptive family. And it's kind of, we see that struggle inside him throughout this whole film, which I think is pretty kind of an interesting dynamic for him.
Andy, what do you think here? Their little dynamic and all of the changing that he has to do, because one of the things that they're kind of leading up to is that jousting event that I forgot to mention, because whoever wins this jousting event is going to be King of England, because again, they are kingless right now. So they're trying to, gain some footing back, some ground back, and have a king again. So at this point, knowing that and all of the things that are happening, what do you think kind of about their dynamic, and do you like it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were fun. Another analogy to an 80s movie. It was very Miyagi-esque to kind of show him, what does, because Wart is like, what does being a fish, a bird, or a squirrel have to do with being king and being a great leader and being a knight and all that stuff? It's like, how does waxing a car and painting a fence make you a good karate champion? It's kind of like, it's teaching, by, showing muscle memory and using your wits and what have you. I mean, I thought the fishing that pike was kind of scary. That was a little bit of a harrowing scene. I love the smitten girl squirrels there. The bird stuff was okay. I really, one character I love, I felt bad for him actually, because he's kind of like a bad guy, I guess, was that persistent mangy wolf that we kept seeing trying to get Arthur all the time.
Yeah.
That was very Chuck Jones there, that character. Like that's kind of, maybe that's what I don't rank it as high, because it doesn't have as much of a Disney feel, although it's a fairy tale, a classic story told. But and the whole thing with Kay and Ector being brawn and not, I mean, Ector's kind of got a brain a little bit, but Kay is just adult. It just likes to sit there and eat turkey legs and thinks he could outjoust anybody in the land. I mean, I thought it was a fun dynamic. I mean, he's Wart's trying to pay his dues, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But Arthur's like, there's much more to you than you shouldn't be their lackey, basically trying to show him that he's better and that he's destined for greatness.
I would agree with all of that. I really like the dynamic here. I think it's not that Hector hasn't been good to Arthur at this point, but I also think it's maybe a different type of someone paying attention to him than he's used to. And therefore, he's really kind of enjoying this, but doesn't entirely know how to take it. Of course, with all this going on, Hector still just really is unsure of Merlin, and he has now accused him of using black magic on the dishes. After trying to unsuccessfully undo the enchanted dishes, and Arthur just defends Merlin, Hector decides to punish Arthur for this, setting him with the mountain chores, and tells Arthur that he's cooked his goose for popping off and choosing another boy named Hobbs as Kay Squire. So at this point, he's now decided, you're not even good enough to be Kay Squire. And this devastates Arthur. And Merlin convinces him, though, again, kind of like what the guys just went through, you got to stick with this because it's still, I know this is what you really wanted, but it's not all that it's about. So he continues his lessons, and this time is the lesson where they turn into the sparrow. And then Arthur accompanies Archimedes on a flying lesson, and he's attacked by a hawk this time. A lot of things attacking him. I don't want to get turned into. I really don't want to get turned into another animal, but it made me curious of all these animals they're turning into. If you were studying with Merlin, what is an animal that you would really hope that he turns you into? I know it's a silly question, but it made me think, what would I really want Merlin to turn me into? And I am not sure, because we've seen what happens to poor little animals in Disney movies. But I want to know, Steve, what would you hope Merlin turns you into? You're like, God, I don't know.
Yeah, putting us on the spot here. I don't know. I think I think I actually wouldn't mind being a bird. Because just the ability to fly and that would be I think would be actually pretty cool.
Okay.
A bigger bird than a sparrow, though.
Yeah, obviously.
Well, not one where you're preying like another bird. I don't know. Yeah. It's Arthurian, so maybe I don't know, a dragon, maybe. No, I mean, there were some things that in this movie, I didn't realize Merlin was a time traveler and a future seer and all this stuff. And he goes to Bermuda, and
and he comes back in the Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah, and then also what we'll talk about when we get there is the duel, so to speak. I mean, how they have any awareness of these creatures, so to speak, because the world is different. We don't have travel we do, and things and knowledge of everything in faraway lands. So
that's very true. And it has mentioned several times that there are a lot of little funny, people in America thought this was too comedic, and I thought that was part of what made it the best. Like you said, the blow me to Bermuda, Merlin introducing Archimedes when they first meet. There is a lot of comedic parts to this, in my opinion. But of course, this is where we meet another character when he is attacked by the hawk, and Arthur ends up flying down the chimney of Madame Mim, who I find hysterical. She is basically they consider her one of the main antagonists, and she is a wicked old witch who relishes in the misery of others. And she believes herself to be the greatest wizard of all times, but her magic obviously is rivaled by her nemesis, none other than Merlin. And this little old lady, I know she's supposed to be the antagonist, but I find her highly kind of likable and hysterical. She turns into a cat and chases Arthur around the cottage at this point. And then when Merlin arrives, having been summoned by Archimedes, because obviously he knows, oh crap, he's gone into Madame Mim's house, kind of begins to rebuke Mim. and kind of send her away. And that's when she decides to challenge Merlin to a wizard's duel, a battle of wits where the players try to destroy one another by transforming into various animals, which is, again, why I thought, what animal would you guys want to be transformed into? So Mim sets some ground rules here, right? And she's like, includes that the rules only be real animals. Only real animals may be used. So no imaginary. Like, you can't be like a pink dragon. And you can't disappear. So during this battle, both wizards transform themselves into a bunch of different creatures. With Merlin turning in, I think it's like a turtle, a rabbit, a caterpillar, walrus. I can't talk. Walrus. Crab, a goat. God, I can't talk. That's a funny word. Like, I made it this far in life and didn't realize how funny that word is. Okay. I know, place to be nation, I am not intoxicated. She turns into things such as crocodile, a hen, a fox, an elephant, a tiger, and a snake. I think there's a couple others that I did not write down, but those are the basic gist. And then finally, she turns into a purple dragon, which is supposed to be against the rules. Although I like that little note she makes that she never explicitly outlawed purple dragons. So what are we thinking here when she's like, no, I said no pink ones. I didn't say no purple ones. So what are we thinking at this point when she transforms and, she's trying to outwit Merlin? Are we thinking, aha, he's got her?
Yeah, this is first. Madame Mim is my favorite character in this movie, and I love this duel. This is like if the whole movie was like this duel, it would be up there.
Oh yeah.
But it's not. But it's so much fun. I love these when you use different. It's reminds me I always kind of like the Wonder Twins, even though people crapped on them, because they would suit their powers to the situation, and this is really them. A battle of wits trying to say okay, well, you're going to be this animal. That's going to counter this one. I'm going to counter you. And it's about a bunch of one-upsmans and counteractions here. Right. With I have it on right now, and the walrus just fell on top of the hen.
Walrus.
Yes, and then she becomes an elephant, which again, how they have knowledge of. But
right.
It is fun because they retain the look too. While they're the animals. And it's just the back and forth is tremendous, and yeah, I like her. She bends the rules to suit her needs, and
loophole abuse is what we're calling it.
Yes. But I always knew in the end Merlin would probably come up on top.
Right. I mean, it's kind of what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Steve, what do you think about Madame Mim in this duel here?
Yeah, this is definitely the highlight of the film. It's funny, the movie's an hour and 20 minutes, and we don't see her until an hour in. So it's
right.
At that point you're already close to the end of the film, and now the main antagonist comes in. I wouldn't even really consider her an antagonist. I actually consider her more like a nuisance, because that's what she just kind of she's just really there to kind of stir up trouble for Merlin. And just to kind of prove that she is the greatest, and she's trying to show herself off to Arthur. It's funny how she transforms. At first, it's a half woman, half pig to show that she could be uglier than she already is, and then flip the switch and turn into a vixen of a woman. And and then the duel with her and Merlin, just them going back and forth with all these different animals, just trying to outdo each other. And then in the very end, the point again that Merlin's been trying to get across to Arthur this whole time, that it takes it takes knowledge. He ends up, of all the things to turn into, he turns into basically a virus and infects Mim with a disease, and that's what leads him to end up defeating her in the end. But it is definitely like I said, definitely one of the highlights of the film, and she definitely makes her mark for the very limited time she's in it.
Yeah, I agree with you that when they called her the antagonist, I was like, what? But I mean, she technically is, but you're right. She's less of an antagonist and more of a nuisance. I think she's also more comedic relief, to be honest. She's really funny.
Well, there's no true singular antagonist in this movie.
That is very true. Very true.
You know, there's no Scar, no Ursula, no
right.
You know, Maleficent.
Right.
There's like, you know, it's really a story about there really isn't anybody for him to defeat. You know, he is worthy. He just doesn't know it yet.
Right.
And he has to do this one action he has to do, which we haven't gotten to yet, which really will seal the deal for him. And Merlin knows that, and he's preparing him basically. And Mim's like kind of like a detour, I would think. You know.
I'm not even going to try to say the name of the germ when Merlin, if you guys want to try to say it, but it's Merlin. It tells her, you know, okay, you've made this loophole. Basically, you've turned into this dragon, but madam, I have not disappeared. I am very tiny. I am a germ, and I am called Magliolintoma. Yeah, look it up. Trosis. Basically, he does not break the rules, but finds a loophole and makes her sick. And one of my favorite parts before we move on is when he's like, "You'll be fine. You're in the bed. You're bedridden. You just need a few weeks of rest and lots of sunshine," which I think he did on purpose because Mim goes crazy at this point and is like, "I hate sunshine. I hate it. Horrible, wholesome sunshine. Hate. And he just closes the door and leaves with her still ranting audibly about how much she hates sunshine, which I found hysterical. As a child, found it hysterical. As an adult, for some reason, I still found it highly hysterical. So at this point, we've taken care of that, like you said, kind of like pat our hands dry, because what else were we supposed to do up to this point? And we come to Christmas, and Arthur's friend, Kay, has been knighted, which we knew would happen. Of course, he has that squire, Hobbs, that was supposed to be Arthur, and he comes down with the mumps, which I am so glad we can no longer get the mumps, right? So at this point, Hector decides to reinstate Arthur as Kay's squire, because he has no other option. And he gets excited, Arthur does, and he tells Merlin and Archimedes the news. But this actually disappoints Merlin, that Arthur still prefers this war game to academics, as he says. And he tries to explain that he can't become a knight because he's an orphan. And so a squire is the best position that he can basically attain. And this aggravates Merlin even more. And this is when he transfers himself into a rocket bound for Bermuda. And he decides, nope, he's going to Bermuda, and he's blow me to Bermuda. And he does come back with a Hawaiian shirt, right?
Which is kind of funny, yeah.
Yeah. Which it's hysterical. Again, I think that is one of the funny parts of this movie. So we've got Arthur determined, like, well, this is all I can do. And we've got Merlin, who is aggravated and has blown himself to Bermuda. But, I mean, it is what it is, and Arthur is going to continue on. So Hector, Kay, Pellinmore, and Arthur, of course, with Archimedes, because Archimedes is all alone now, because he didn't take him in the rocket to Bermuda, travels to London for the tournament. And moments before the Kay's match, Arthur realizes, oh, crap, I have forgotten Kay's sword at the end. Of course, it's closed because everybody's at the tournament, so nothing is going to be open. Oh, what does that sound like? Everything is closed. Ugh. So it's closed. I mean, so first off, he's kind of failing at being a squire here, I would just like to point out. Because you have one job.
You had one job.
Right? One job. You have failed. So Archimedes, I don't remember how he notices it. Do you guys? He's basically just flying around, I think, and notices this sword just hanging out in a stone in this churchyard. And he's like, hey, Arthur, go check this out. Which lends me to ask, do we think Archimedes knew what this was or sensed what this was? Before everybody knows what it is, obviously. I'm not like alluding to something, but like, do you either one of you think that Archimedes maybe had, because he is obviously a magical creature, being Merlin's creature and can talk like humans where the other animals can't. Do you think he had some sort of like, they didn't say it, but unknowing knowledge of what this possibly was, or that it was magical in itself?
Well, we've already seen it in the beginning of the film where people attempted to pull it out and it didn't work.
Right.
But they're not from London, they're not familiar, I guess, with it. They're not in the know, so to speak. But I don't know. I think it was just, it could have been maybe part of Merlin's whole big plan. You don't know what that crazy old codger was coming up with. I mean, I think maybe Archimedes had an idea once, like, the illumination and all that started, when Arthur got near the sword and was pulling it out. But, I don't know. I mean, things just happened to work out.
Okay, I'll go with that. Steve, you feel the same, or do you feel a little bit different?
It's hard to say. Like, I mean, because you see when Arthur starts to pull it out, then like the light starts shining down on him. So that's when I think they kind of realize something's strange about the sword, and Archimedes is almost kind of like don't screw with it anymore. Let's just go find something else. But Arthur is just like he's at him. He's like he's got to get Kay's sword, and he ends up pulling it out, and we obviously see what happens. And then when Arthur's in the throne room and he's kind of lamenting what's going on, Archimedes was like, I told you should have just left it there. Because he thought it was going to lead to something bad. I mean, right. Something bad. Obviously, we saw what it led to. It led to England finally getting their king. But I think he didn't know exactly what the sword signified. He just thought it was kind of just one of those, like, it just looked suspicious enough for him to try to warn Arthur away from trying to pull it out of the stone.
Okay. So clearly Arthur at this point he's pulled it out. He's not listening to Archimedes to tell him to stop. He pulls the sword out, brushes back, because in his mind he's still thinking, I have got to provide Kay with the sword because I forgot his at the end. And when he returns, Sir Bart and Ector immediately are like, what the heck? Because they notice this. This has obviously been a story of all time. They're aware of what the sword is. Everyone in this area would know the sword, would probably be able to identify it, except for little orphan Wart, who's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And the tournament is stopped at this point, and they demand that Arthur prove he pulled it out. So Ector places the sword in the anvil again. Kay attempts to remove it. He cannot. Other men attempt to remove it, and they cannot. So again, little Wart manages to pull it out for a second time with ease. And that's when we hear everyone proclaiming, Hail King Arthur, live long King Arthur. And the crowd kneels to him, which, can you imagine? He's only 12. Can you imagine if, like, out of nowhere, you've been orphaned your whole life and now everybody's kneeling to you and you're like, well, yesterday I was turning into a fish. Now I don't know what the heck is going on. I mean, I'm just saying. So at this point, our film does cut over to Arthur, and he is now the crowned king sitting on the throne with Archimedes, and he's feeling completely unprepared to take the responsibility of royalty. He's very overwhelmed by the cheering crowd, which, again, I mean, you're 12. I mean, would you not be? And he calls for Merlin to help, who arrives in, as Andy said, this 20th century attire. So not only have we zipped off to Bermuda, which I want to know, you think it's a joke of like where the Bermuda Triangle and how time is different there and all of that, or do we just think he is a time traveler, period?
I think it's a little both.
A little both? Okay.
Yeah, I would probably say that.
Okay. So he comes in his Hawaiian shirt, and he is actually elated at this point to find out that Arthur is the king that he had seen in the future. So he'd seen their future king. He just didn't, either he didn't want to say he knew that it was Arthur, or he knew it the whole time and he was so excited. And he tells the boy that he will rise and lead the Knights of the Round Table, which we're all familiar with. And he's going to accomplish many, many great feats and become one of the most famous figures in literature and motion pictures. So that obviously gives him the courage he needs to sit on the throne as King Arthur. And there's so many more stories that come from King Arthur, but this one is clearly where, the story of him, or Disney's version of him, pulling the sword from the stone and being a orphan, and so not knowing what some of this does. So now that we're at the end of this, overall, I know you guys said it wasn't one of your favorites, but now that we're at the end and you've had these pieces of comedy and this kind of antagonist, but not really, where overall were you feeling when you did your rewatch as an adult? And if you can remember how you felt as a kid, is it pretty much on par? What do you think, Steve?
Well, having never seen it as a kid, I don't have that
that's right, you did not. Sorry.
But yeah, like I said, when I watched it the first time last year for the reviews, like I said, I thought it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I think the reputation had it stated, but it definitely was not. It wasn't one of the. I don't want to say one of the best, but like I said, compared to what we had just watched, movies like 101 Dalmatians, Sleeping Beauty, Alice in Wonderland, Cinderella, all these great films that still hold up very well these today. This one doesn't. It's a very interesting film, especially for the time it was released. It is kind of important to say that this would actually be the last film released while Walt Disney was alive. Which is which is a little bit, it is a kind of a sad fact to know. But as a film, I think it definitely, I would probably say belongs really in the middle. It's not an upper, not great. It's not terrible. It's just there, in my opinion.
That's fair. Look, if you're a low-rated Disney animated classic, it's still better than, 60, 70% of all animated films ever released, I would think. It did gain in me. It still didn't move up the chart that much. I think it is slow. It drags in some spots. The fact that we don't get enough Madame Mim, I don't know, really, maybe they could have had her kind of causing some, mischief throughout, instead of, just being a random pike or a, hawk or whatever. It could have been her, could have been the one behind it the whole time. And then she reveals herself at the end. Maybe that could have added to the movie. I think, Kay and Hector are kind of, Hector's a little more fleshed out, but Kay is very one-dimensional. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like I said, I like the Mangy Wolf. I did kind of enjoy him as a down on his luck Wile E. Coyote sort throughout the movie. But I did enjoy it watching it. I'm glad I rewatched it because it's not something I might have just done on my own, out of the blue. Just I feel like watching story and stuff. No, it was. I'm glad we did it for this show series, because it is an enjoyable film. It's just, it's just a lot of those movies are just so on another level. That's really what it is. It's at the bar is so high, and this is a good film. It's just not up there with those films. That's all there is to it. Archimedes, I'm kind of on. I think I really wasn't a big fan of. I know Steve loves him, and I know he knows his place. He's a good contrast to Merlin. Mm-hmm. But I was kind of in terms of it being, when I invested in the movie, I was kind of oh, all right. But I do like that he warms up to Arthur, and in the end. But like I said, it was. I think the fact that what's funny too is we'll talk about this when we get to Aladdin. The genie doesn't show for 40 minutes, and that movie is about an hour and a half, I would think, or so. And
I think people forget that too.
Yeah, you don't notice it though. And this one you do notice, like, where was this goofy character that breathes a lot of life into the short time she's in this movie? That's what it is. I think there's a lacking, those other creatures that they interacted with, like the girl squirrels were cute, the fish and the scary pike and all that stuff, but they didn't have a personality to them, and if they had, it would have maybe added something to it, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I will say, so apparently this movie was nominated. I don't know if it made it in. I'd have to do some more, but I just saw this in our notes here. The American Film Institute has actually nominated The Sword in the Stone for its top 10 animated films list, which I find kind of odd based on the amount of people that were like, I don't like this, and then all the research I did saying that it was liked more in Britain than it was the U.S. So strange there. Something else I wanted to note was that we all kind of liked Madame Mim and wondered or said they should have done more. Apparently, Madame Mim was used later. She was adapted into what's referred to as the Duck Universe, where she sometimes would team up with Magica De Spell or the Beagle Boys, and she has appeared as part of the Mickey Mouse universe, teaming up with Black Pete on occasion, and the Phantom Bot at one point. She was in love with Captain Hook in several stories. And then she has also appeared in numerous comics in the U.S. By a studio program that was done in the 60s and 70s as a sidekick of Magica. But most of those, she appears more morbid and polite than truly evil. So it's almost like she kind of lost her truly evil streak and appears more like just morbid-esque, and she's actually really polite, which is funny. But I think it's cool that they found this character and said, let's carry her forward in our comics.
Yeah, I'm sure she's probably, I don't know what her presence is in terms of a walk-around character in the parks and her ever. But she's probably on the most sought after list, because there are rare characters that people like, there are message boards or, Facebook groups or Twitter that like, oh my God, Robin Hood and Little John are out at Disneyland Park today. Like that will go out and people will seek them out to get their autograph or get a picture with them. Because, I love Disney, but I don't live close enough to a Disney park, but two, that is crazy.
Yes. There's a group I'm in, it's called Moms Planning Disney, and most of it is like, what was your budget? Tell us your favorite must-eat places. Tell us the best, blah, blah. But occasionally they will be like, I am at the park and I have spotted Stitch, for example, because, he's one that he's like only ever at one spot for like 30 minutes and then he's gone. And then he's gone for the rest of the week. So it is very interesting that, people do that. A few things I found out. This is actually the last animated film that was released when Walt was alive. And then we've talked about this show before, Once Upon a Time, but this film actually does make a cameo appearance on Once Upon a Time. There's an episode entitled The Dark Swan, where young Emma goes to see and receives a cryptic warning from a very disguised Merlin. So there's that. Merlin has made appearances in the video game Kingdom Hearts, which is one of my favorite video games. And of course, there's different variations of Kingdom Hearts. And the UK DVD version actually omits the second half of Madame Mim's first line. Sounds like someone's sick. How lovely. I do hope it's serious. Something dreadful. And the reasons for omitting this, they don't know. There's no real reason. Apparently in the UK, she only says, sounds like someone's sick. How lovely. I think adding those extra parts of, I do hope it's serious, something dreadful, just proves who she is. So I think that is, again, kind of pulling out that negative. The sword appears at Disneyland.
In Disney World and Fantasyland.
So I actually have not visited the sword. You have visited the sword, correct, Andy?
Yes, I have. We all attempted to pull it out. I believe it does come out for a lucky random guest. I think once a day. I'm not exactly sure. Somebody can, write on the Facebook post and Place Nation page when we do share this pod when it goes up. Yes, we all attempted it. It was, hot in August. I don't know how popular it may be now because of they might have to hire somebody to disinfect the sword every time somebody tries it. But yeah, we all gave it a shot, and that sucker is in. I don't know if there's somebody like sitting there like in a room on the camera going, hey, all right, let's see, we're gonna release it for this kid. I'm sure it's a little boy or a little girl. I'm sure. Right. Some grown man is not going to be the king of England in Fantasyland. I would be happy if I pulled it out. It would be a great photo op and memory for family. Sure. I would much rather Dylan or Jessica would pull it out. It is fun though. It's right in front of, I think, the it's front and center in Fantasyland.
It's in front of the respective carousels.
Yes, in the carousel.
Disneyland, and Disneyland's is King Arthur's carousel. Disney World, I don't know.
It's right in the courtyard if you walk around the castle, it's on the back side of the castle. If you're facing, from the entrance of the park, I believe that's where it is. It's like right in the middle, and there's, I think, Peter Pan is on one side and Winnie the Pooh's on the other, I believe. It's been a few years since that trip. Yeah.
So apparently they used to do a ceremony where whoever the lucky child of the day was that would pull the sword would be declared the temporary ruler of Fantasyland. And it was a common show until the ceremony actually ended a few years ago, it says. And I wonder, maybe it was just too much. I don't know. Steve, have you ever been able to visit the sword in either of the parks?
No, I've actually I've never been to Disneyland to this point. It's definitely on my to-do list, but I have been to Disney World many times, and I don't know if I've ever seen the Sword in the Stone in the Magic Kingdom, or maybe we just didn't think enough to try to search it out.
Right. I mean, the place is usually packed no matter what time of year you go, so I could see where you could miss it, because I honestly did myself until my husband pointed out. But we didn't go try to pull it or anything like everybody else did. I want to say that's another thing, like it's not like a ride, so there's like no fast pass to it or anything. You just have to be patient, and there's a lot of people trying to take a picture and pull a sword. So that may be why you missed it. You probably just saw a crowd of people and was like, let's not go over there.
Yeah. I'm a meticulous planner, so we were in between rides and whatever fast passes. When it comes to Disney, I haven't really much planned to the second to optimize our time. And it's funny. My family made fun of me, but at the end of the trip, they're like, "Oh, like we thought it was going to be crazy, and we were going to be like on this." But it was just that I planned it to where you have very, you're walking, and every third attraction was indoors because it was August in Central Florida, so we need to be inside quite a bit. And and it just happened to be like, we had time before we were going to get online, or maybe there was a bathroom break or something. And it was something, you should definitely seek out, especially for those of you with, youngins that are like, maybe like 8 to 10, 11 years old, probably like the optimum age to pull the sword out, and still kind of believe in the magic.
He'll still be all over it. He'd be like, yeah.
Oh yeah, I know. Whenever we'll go back, with Dylan or Jessica, everybody will try it. I mean, my goal is we're going this year, but we're not going to. We're mostly going to Universal and we'll be over at Star Wars, so we're not going to the Magic Kingdom. But I hope to go to Disneyland in next year late next year for my 50th. So hopefully.
So one thing I want to touch on really quick before we leave this evening is something that Steve actually brought up in a private chat that we had the other day. So I thought it was really funny when I was doing research that this appeared. I think it's been mentioned in the past, maybe not on our podcast, but it was something that had been mentioned before, is the recycling of animated scenes. Steve, you actually sent us a video the other day showing, I believe it was Winnie the Pooh and Jungle Book, where it was. Was it?
Yeah, it was mainly. It was more actually it was more like it was a lot of Winnie the Pooh and Jungle Book, but it was also like Jungle Book and actually the one scene from Sword of the Stone where Arthur gets licked by his dogs, and then it's Jungle Book and Ichabod and Mr. Toad. But my mom actually had sent that to me. She had found it and she had passed it along to me and said I should show this to you guys, because like you said, it was it's pretty common knowledge during this time. Like, we're entering a time frame where a lot of a couple of these films we talk about are going to have recycled animations, and I thought that was It was kind of interesting to kind of get the ball rolling on that.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that you sent that, because while I was doing some looking, and so one of the things I do when I'm gonna host, because it's a movie that I am passionate about, I kind of dig in to find little things out that maybe I didn't already know, or I knew but I wanted to tell everybody else. And it actually started talking heavily about recycled animation, and you had just sent that. And there are actually a lot of scenes that I'll go through really quickly that are in this that are considered recycled. And that goes from the opening credits. It's reused from Sleeping Beauty, which is 4 years earlier to this movie. The deer that Cage tries shooting with his arrow is actually copied from Bambi's mother. When Kay and Ector are in the kitchen fighting against the enchanted dishware, which is an amazing scene, Ector swings his sword back and accidentally hits Kay on the head, and Kay groans. This is a repeat, actually, from Jasper and Horace in 101 Dalmatians, where they're in the fight scene with Pongo and Purdy. And the archive audio of Pat O'Malley, who voices Jasper, is used at that point for Kay's groan. So that's a repeat. And then there's footage where Arthur is affectionately being licked by the dogs, as Steve mentioned, and that is reused from Jungle Book 4 years later. So they reuse it in the Jungle Book. And then the scene where Arthur is the squirrel jumping from one tree to the next was reused in Fox and the Hound all the way in 1981. And lastly, when Arthur goes to the forest to retrieve Kay's arrow, he pushes aside a branch and weaves in and out of a few small trees. And this actually was reused later in the Black Cauldron. So I find that highly entertaining, and I'd like to try to start keeping up as we move forward now, since this is going to be a common theme that Steve pointed out. So if you're rewatching with us as we go along, kind of check that out. It's really cool to me that they can reuse the animation and it still has the same effect and works so well. So any last thoughts about our movie or recycled animation or the lack of a music score to this movie, gentlemen?
No, just glad. I mean, I think they're probably, like everything else, there is probably a live action in the works for Disney Plus, which
I would love that.
I'll tune in to watch. I still have to catch up on Mulan and Lady and the Tramp live actions. Same. I've seen the other ones, but I'm glad I watched it. It is. I have a higher opinion of it than I did going in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I did see when I was looking at I had the wiki page up. I think I did see there is a live action in the works. It's just kind of it's kind of in abeyance right now just because of everything that's going on in the world with the world. But yeah, it's like you said, it's a fine film for what it was. It's not gonna blow your way, but I don't think it's definitely not boring. I think that's the important thing, at least for me, for a film, is that if as long as it's not boring and I can be entertained by it, I'm gonna enjoy it, and that's what I felt when watching the film.
Cool. So I still really love this film, and I thank you guys both for keeping it. Since we're going in order here, I thank you for keeping it and not being like, oh, I didn't really like that one. And till we come back around with our next one, if you follow in chronological order, that means next time you can join us for the Jungle Book. But tell people between now and Jungle Book where they can find you at. Andy, I know you're kind of all over Place to Be Nation, but is there anything that you would really like to tell people about?
Well, I think I've mentioned before on a pod, but I don't know if you have, but it may be out by the time they hear this, because we don't exactly know when we go up. But you and I have a brand new pod together.
We do. I have not actually mentioned it yet. I alluded to on a pod that I recorded last week, but I didn't say it because I said, I don't know if Andy has announced it.
I think I alluded to it. I think I may have announced it on the show, but I couldn't remember. I do so many shows. It's like, but you can go ahead and, give the name of the show and what we're going to be doing.
Oh, my goodness. So Andy and I are taking another deep dive thanks to Disney Plus. And you can start joining us monthly, I think is what we decided. Is that correct,
Yep.
Andy?
It'll be monthly.
Monthly as we go through the history and lore and all of the wonderful episodes and movies that come with the world created by another Jim Henson himself. That is the Muppets. So you can find Andy and I coming up very soon on the most sensational, inspirational, celebrational, Muppetational podcast on PlayStation Nation, of course.
Yes. I am so looking forward to this. Of course, I love doing pods with you, Miranda, but also the Muppets are so near and dear to my heart because I grew up loving the Muppets. I used to watch it. It was on at 7:30 every night. My dad would watch it with me, and he also has an affinity, especially the Swedish Chef. Is his favorite character. I am always personally a Fozzie, but, Gonzo, Waldorf, and Statler. Yes. And the movies are tremendous. Yeah, so we will be – basically our plan is that each month we will be reviewing 4 episodes of The Muppet Show, and once we finish a season, we will do a movie. So once we finish season 1 of The Muppet Show, we will do the Muppet movie, season 2. Probably one of my favorite movies of all time, The Great Muppet Caper. Yes. And then, Muppets Take Manhattan. We also, maybe we'll continue on into Muppets Tonight or that other Muppet show they did that was kind of like an Office kind of takeoff.
And apparently they're going to have another one.
Yeah. And we could even do a review of the Muppets 4D movie from Disney. I love them so much, and I really hope and wish that they finally figure out the right thing to do with them. I mean, Jason Segel had such a great love and affinity, and it showed in that movie. The sequel was really disappointing, in my opinion. I mean, I also heard that Joseph Gordon-Levitt wanted to do a Fraggle Rock movie, which is another love of mine. Yes. This is going to be a love fest for me, and I'm looking forward to it. But also, all kinds of great stuff here on the PlayStation Nation Pop Experience feed with our snazzy brand new logo that you can see. We have Laugh-In Theater, which he was on an episode very recently. We did the Hangover. As well as I have Pop Goes to the Couch, where we review the streaming shows, WandaVision, and then we'll be following that with Falcon and Winter Soldier. And great debate. Who knows? Looking back, may come back at some point if we ever get to go to the movies again. Year in Pop. So
it will come back. We're just
I know it will. I know. Just lots of fun stuff. And I also have a couple of shows on the Wrestling Network, which is Evolution and Great Debate Wrestling, so check those out. Those are kind of quarterly, so I do those, not as often as I do the shows here on the Pop feed. So check it out. Lots of great stuff, though, that I bring to you as much as I can.
Awesome. Steve, where can the lovely people find you? Other pods? Where can they message you? All those great things.
Well, as Andy mentioned, I was on Laugh-In Theater. We watched The Hangover, which was a great time. So much fun doing that. I also made a couple appearances on a few episodes of Making Mount Rushmore. Talked 80s and 90s one-hit wonders, and more recently talked video game characters and series. So those were great fun to do. Other than that, you can usually find me at PlaySpeedNation.com. I have several articles that go up on a regular basis. Steve Vinershaw previewing the box office report, and my wonderful reviews of Disney, which are all back catalog on PlaySpeedNation.com, and the wonderful list of Disney, which are going on right now. You can also find me over at the Place to Be Facebook page. We do a lot of great stuff over there, topics, questions, discussions, tournaments eventually. Tournaments will start back up again. So that's usually where you can find me. And, of course, as always, you'll find me on this show.
Awesome. So a lot in the works for everybody. Of course, not forgetting about myself. You guys can always find me with my first podcasting love over on the Ginny position with Geek and Sassy. Been going for almost 5 years strong. Very proud of that. And of course, Ginny has a plethora of things over there as well. All of our feeds that are associated with us or our friends that support us are fantastic feeds to follow. There's literally something for anybody. Anytime someone asks me, do you recommend any podcasts, I just give them all the feeds and say, go to town. As Steve said, please join us over on the Place to Be Nation Facebook group. There's so much we talk about. There's a lot of wrestling, but it's not just wrestling. Sometimes we post little quizzes like, which Doritos am I? And, which TV show has to go. And we have a lot of fun with that. Of course, you can find me on, I don't know how many shows at this point at Place to Be Nation. So there's The Muppet Show, this show, Telly and T, and I have lots of ideas for other shows. And if you have ideas for other shows, you can message me on Instagram at Mom's a Nerd. Give me your ideas. Tell me what you think you want us to add to our wonderful pop experience here. And with that, I bid you all adieu. So, leave off, you Findus chain, you.